You're listening to an IOE podcast.
Powered by UCL Minds.
Welcome to the Staffroom. I'm Elaine Long.
And I am Mark Quinn.
We are programme leaders on the UCL Early Career Teacher programme. Why are we in the Staffroom? We're here because this is where the best professional learning conversations always take place. This is where problems faced by teachers and leaders today can be explored critically and where meaningful connections between research and practice can be made.
Over the course of the series, we'll hear the voices of different colleagues as they come into the staff room, from ECTs to academics and executive leaders. We'll talk about all things education, the challenges and the joys. So why don't you enjoy a coffee with us, perhaps even grab a biscuit and sit down for an hour of staff room chat. Welcome to the staff room, Samantha O'Sullivan. We're delighted to have you in our staff room, Samantha. We've got some nice seats for you to sit on. Take the weight off your feet, have a sit down. My job at the beginning of this is to offer you a drink, coffee, a tea, whatever you might like. What can I fix for you?
Oh, just a black coffee, thank you. No sugar and no biscuits for me.
No biscuits. That's
sorry.
sacrilege in the staff room, I have to tell you, Samantha. But the black coffee is absolutely the best. That's the way I take it too.
Brilliant.
Mark, can I have those biscuits that you put aside for Samantha? Because I feel like I need a chocolate biscuit this morning. So I'll have Samantha's share. Thank you.
Okay.
And you've already done one thing to help me this morning, Samantha. Another thing you can do is tell us a bit about yourself, because I know our listeners will be really excited to hear a bit about you, your career journey, and what gives you the most joy.
All right. So I have been in my teaching bit of my life. I was a teacher for about 8 years in a primary school, a couple of primary schools. And in 2019, I resigned from teaching primary and began my EdD at UCL, Institute of Education. And whilst primarily being a research student, I also continued teaching. I taught for 1 year on as an OPGTA when the PGTAs were online back in those dark days, on the MA for Education. And then I've been a PGTA for, I think, three years now for, I should know this, that the BA, Education, Society and Culture.
Samantha, for our listeners who don't know what PGTA stands for, could you just tell us what it does stand for?
Yes, it's a postgraduate teaching assistant. So I get to be the teacher in seminar groups for our undergraduate students. So I get to continue with that hat on, and I work with a lecturer at the university on their course. But I get to be a teacher still, and it's a really lovely way. I really, really enjoy it, actually. I love spending my time with the undergraduates, and the particular module I have been teaching on, living in a school society, is year one. So I get 18-year-olds fresh into London. Love it, actually. It's really, really good. Love teaching.
You've gone to both extremes of the age range, from primary to undergraduate. Which do you prefer? What do you see as the similarities and differences?
Elaine, can I tell you, they are more similar than they would like to know.
I thought you might say that.
I spent 7 years teaching year 3 and 7 years and 3 years now teaching the equivalent of year 14, I suppose. And they still want rewards for their good work. They still want their voice heard. They still want a really good PowerPoint that's engaging. They still want me to remember their names.
Did they put their hand up to ask for the toilet as well, Samantha?
Yeah, they still do that.
I would say, Samantha, that time you made them sit on the carpet, I thought that was a bit strange. But
it's when I ring up their mums, that's when they don't like it.
Samantha, we've invited you on because you are a researcher into teacher well-being.
Yes.
It's quite a contended term, actually,
Yes.
well-being. So I think that's where we should start. So
Okay.
how do you define well-being?
So I think it's a good way to describe it as a contended term. I don't think out there in the world we have a really good grasp of what well-being is. Before I looked into well-being, I honestly thought well-being was, yoga and chocolates, and we're good. We've got well-being, and it's really so much more. In fact, it's not yoga and chocolate at all. I kind of, in my head, I've rationalized it into, firstly, types of well-being. You have one type, which is hedonism. So hedonism is a short-term happiness, joy that comes out of an immediate rush. And it can be things like, when you think of hedonism, we think of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. We think of having that bar of chocolate. We think of buying the thing that was in our ASOS basket. It's an immediate, we get that rush, we enjoy it, puts a smile on our face, perhaps. Interestingly, with hedonism, there's often, although not always, something negative that might be associated with it. So if you think the chocolate, then there's your waistline, the ASOS shopping, then there's your bank balance, the alcohol, there's your hangover. There's often, not always, but often there's that side to hedonism. And another type of well-being is eudaimonic well-being. Eudaimonia is a word ancient Greek philosophers, Aristotle and Plato, use this word, and it comes from the phrase, well-lived life. And it's about being fruitful and engaged and working to be content and perhaps even tired, but things that create our well-being on a kind of more macro scale. And a metaphor I use to describe this is weeding a border. So you're on your knees are damp, you might have rain running down your back, you might have broken a nail, you're uncomfortable, but you're weeding this border. And then, but later on, you're standing in your kitchen with a cup of tea and you're looking at the weeded border and you're feeling good. And over the weeks, the spring and the summer, as the flowers come up, the bulbs come up and the flowers bloom, and you can kind of feel good about something. And it's something that you continually feel good about over a longer period of time. So we've got that, there's this typology of well-being. And then I've just defined it as well within that as different domains. And those, whilst the typologies are what we see perhaps on the outside, the domains tend to be a little bit more internal. And I'm thinking, I have to be honest, from an occupational well-being, that's where I've been studying. So you've got psychological domain, and that will be things about our autonomy, our professional development, the communication that goes on in the workplace, our self-efficacy. There's social well-being or social domain of well-being, which is about our relationships, is the strength of the horizontal relationships in our workplace and of the vertical relationships, the people we report to or those who report to us. The environmental domain, which is the building, the space that we work in, the place we do our PPA, how good is our parking spots. There's the physical domain, it's our vitality. Did we get enough sleep? Are we eating? Are we healthy? Are we sick? And then, although in my writing, in my thesis, I have this as a fifth domain, is the subjectivity. It kind of encapsulates all of it, because we see our well-being subjectively. What's good well-being for me may be not good for someone else. And I would say, for example, my husband needs to play tennis 3 times a week for his vitality and his social well-being and his psychological well-being. He needs that. If I played tennis 3 times a week, I would be sad. And I think this idea of the subjectivity and the uniqueness for each individual is so important in our lives, but definitely from an occupational perspective. And those are that's the way I view well-being.
Well, that's as clear a definition and a delineation of that word as I think I've heard, Samantha. So thank you for that.
Okay.
And it's clear to me that, so we sometimes think of well-being as that kind of sugar rush.
Yeah.
You know, I'm feeling great right now. And that's what I think you've termed the hedonism.
Yes.
But in fact, we are in the typology of well-being. We're much more interested, and we'll pull the threads of this a little bit as we take our way through this podcast, in that eudaimonia, that kind of connectedness with the way we live our lives, that sense of and you talked about those inner domains that we that comprise that sense of well-being, that kind of well-lived life well-being. And it's really interesting that you've hit on those, the social and the psychological and the environmental and the physical. And of course, it might be one thing which leads to all of that. You mentioned, that the playing tennis might excite all of those emotions or those responses from you, or it might be several things, right? Yes. And that's the key point at the end, is the subjectivity of it. It's different for you, it's different for me. It'll be different for one teacher and the teacher sitting in the classroom next door, right?
Absolutely. And this, I was skipping about a bit, but when I read about well-being awards that come externally, that people pay thousands of pounds to be plonked into a school, I think it really doesn't speak to the fact that the subjectivity of the individuals within the school, and also each context is really different.
Yes.
And the well-being, however it's going to be nurtured and fostered, I think has to come from the people in the school. It needs to come from the staff.
It's interesting because I've learnt a new word this morning, which is eudaimonic well-being. So thank you very much for that. And as you were describing the metaphor to bring it to life of the person weeding and getting painful needs, but then later on experiencing the joy of having a beautiful garden, I thought about schools and teaching, and I thought sometimes perhaps maybe we focus too much on relieving the painful knees and the weeding, and in doing so, if you like, in schools, that part of the metaphor would equate to working hours and teaching and the slog of planning lessons. And sometimes we focus a lot on taking that pain away, but sometimes I wonder if that comes at the expense of eudaimonic well-being, because actually the painful needs and the complexity of teaching are part of what lead to that meaningful experience, which is also a huge part of the well-being of educators. So I think that's quite a powerful distinction for well-being in schools as well, that it's not simply about reducing workload, it's about thinking about well-being in a much more holistic and complex way. And I know that's a huge part of your research, and I wondered if you could just talk a bit about how did you find this out, what was the methodology for your research, and what are some of the other insights you had when you were doing your research?
I think how I came across that, how I found out about this, I suppose, I went into a MAT and interviewed 12 teachers and 3 head teachers about what were their wellbeing experiences. I really wanted to do something that was qualitative. I wanted to talk to people. I not really interested in numbers and data in that respect. And a lot of wellbeing research does appear, there's a lot of questionnaires and things and counting. And I really wanted to actually get people's stories. That for me was really important. And then when you talk to teachers and the head teachers about what's happening and what their experiences are of wellbeing, you find a really complex picture. It isn't something that's straightforward. Then there isn't a 2 + 2 = 4. And the more you look at it, the more you see that there's a lack of understanding, which really made me go back and go, okay, what is what is well-being? What is it we're looking at? When I was looking at my data, I used a theoretical lens to support a theoretical framework of the job resource demand theory, which is Bakker and Demetriou theory. And the job demand resource theory says that if we have job demands, if you create more job demands on an individual, you will have poorer well-being and worse occupational outcomes. And if you have more job resources or better job resources, you will have more motivated staff who have better well-being, and you'll have better organisational outcomes. And when I came across this theory, I thought, oh, okay, so well-being initiatives that happen in schools are going to be job resources, and they're going to create better well-being. And that's, I just kind of, that was my expectation. And then I went into schools, and when I'm talking to teachers and head teachers about the wellbeing initiatives that were there to support and nurture their wellbeing and create motivated staff and better organisational outcomes, what I was finding was repeatedly the wellbeing initiatives were in fact creating demands on the staff, and not all of them, not by any stretch, but enough of them were creating demands, and actually, instead of improving well-being, instead of helping the staff be more motivated, helping them, giving them the space and skills to do their job, they were doing the opposite. And this is why the definition of well-being for me was so important, because when you understand what well-being is, and if you understand what well-being is, you're not going to then create something with the name of well-being, but actually isn't well-being. Does that make sense?
Which picks up on your expression, well-being literacy, I think, yes. Samantha.
Yeah.
So again, I'm going to ask for definitions here. What do you mean by that? And I suppose you could take it. You could actually explain to us what might be well-being illiteracy, yes, as well as a well-being literacy.
Okay, so well-being literacy, I needed, in the thesis, I needed kind of a catch-all phrase to describe understanding not just what well-being is, what well-being in an occupational environment looks like, but also understanding how to ask people, how to evaluate their well-being, and an understanding of what well-being initiatives are out there, how to use them in your context, in your schools, for example. So the well-being literacy, as I say, is a catch-all for the extent that a school leader can pull together all the strings and all the things that mean well-being. So when a head teacher understands, or any organisational leader understands, that is hedonistic, and that is going to be, so for example, put in, what are they called? You know those little chocolate marshmallows wrapped in silver? I forget what they're called.
Tea cakes.
Tea cakes, thank you. Yeah. So I used to have a head teacher. Do you know what? I love them.
Yeah.
But the head teacher would come round and she'd put these chocolate tea cakes on your desk during the day. And I know what she was thinking. She was thinking, this is a really nice thing. This is going to make everyone happy. And I would look at this chocolate tea cake that, first of all, there was a school policy saying that the children can't bring cakes and chocolate into school anyway. So I always felt really uncomfortable about this chocolate tea cake. And then I basically have spent the last 20 years on a diet. And I don't know about you, but everyone in the staff room is on a diet. They just all are. And these chocolate tea cakes would arrive. It was a hedonistic thing. It was done without any evaluation, without understanding my subjective well-being. And it was well-being illiteracy. It was an example of well-being illiteracy. It was and it's something about, it's in that fuzzy place of relationships and care and understanding actually what the people in your organisation needs, and it isn't chocolate tea cakes.
No, I do agree with you, as much as I was being flippant about loving those chocolate tea cakes. No, because, you know, you kind of eat it and then you think, well, now I've broken my diet and I'm still tired and still miserable. So actually, in the long term, it's made things worse. And you see a lot of that in schools, don't you? Certainly in terms of wellbeing initiative. And sometimes I almost feel like there's a slight gaslighting about it. You know, for example, I've worked in schools where they said, go to this yoga class, Elaine. And I thought, well, if I go to the yoga class, that's even less time I spend with my own family. So that's not helping that. But B, I almost felt like it was slight gaslighting, because I thought the problem isn't the yoga class. The problem is the sort of leadership culture, you know, because it's kind of suggesting that the problem rests with me and my management of well-being. Rather than the culture of the school. Did you see any of that level of misunderstanding?
It's kind of repeatedly. I mean, the interesting thing about the yoga, which we had yoga and dance classes and all sorts, was that it was that, we're going to make you more resilient, so you can still do this job, and it doesn't matter how we create what the job looks like, but it's up to you to be a better. And as opposed to taking it back to the organisation, there's one of the ways I categorised wellbeing initiatives in the school was using the primary, secondary, tertiary definition from an author called Lamontagne, who describes primary initiatives as those that are organisational wide, that are about changing the structure of the organisation in order that the wellbeing problems don't occur in the first place. Secondary initiatives are things that, we've got a problem, and we're going to try and make something a bit better. And then a tertiary initiative really speaks to an individual who has perhaps a kind of burnout, stress, really has a problem, and it's a kind of wellbeing first aid there, that kind of situation. And a lot of the well-being I was seeing was in this secondary, is that we're trying to fix this. So we're trying to fix your resilience by offering you yoga classes, or we're trying to make everyone feel better by, I had one interesting one, which was, what does she call it? Random acts of kindness, where post-it notes were put on people's desks with different names on, and you had to do something kind for that individual by the end of, the end of the week or the fortnight. And you can see what the school leaders, it was coming from a place of kindness themselves. Okay, what I want to do is to spread kindness and love and recognition in my school, and I'm going to get all the teachers to do it really for each other, because that's really warm and fuzzy, and this is a lovely thing that I'm doing. And I can kind of, I can rationalize it. I can put myself in the position of the head teacher. But what actually happens is I'm working away and I've got the children and whatever's going on, and then someone puts a post-it note that says Doris on it, and now I've got an extra job to do.
Bloody Doris.
I've got to say, I don't even like Doris. I don't know what she wants. What am I doing for Doris? And it's another thing. One of the teachers said, I'll try and get this quote right. One of the teachers said when I was interviewing him, she said, it's like they don't understand what's causing our stress. They do these things to pretty up my life. Pretty up. And it was just like, that kind of got me in my heart, this idea that they recognise the performativity of the wellbeing initiatives. They are there to show that I'm doing well-being. Sometimes they're there because I'm trying to do well-being, but it's this complex web of, without the well-being literacy, the well-being initiatives they're putting in their schools are are mostly this secondary type of well-being. Instead of trying to change an organisation at the primary level, they're mostly in this secondary space, which involves, like you say, yoga and these random acts of kindness and putting chocolates on desks and all of this. And they're not in the primary space where they should be, and giving someone this organisational, I don't know, how would you say it, developing the organisation in such a way that they don't need to be putting post-it notes on people's desks.
It can be easy to fall into that trap as a leader, can't it? Because I remember in the days where I was on Twitter, and I used to see all those things streaming like mug bombs. And I remember I led professional learning in my school, and I remember watching everyone got these bags at the start of the year, and they had paracetamol in and chocolate bars and, you know, all the rest of it. And I was thinking, oh my goodness, should I rush off to Sainsbury's and, you know, pack all these bags together? And then I thought, no, don't be silly, because actually the best gift you can give them is a decent professional learning program that speaks to their motivation and needs, and will support them to be the best teachers that they want to be. But it is hard not to fall into that trap as a leader, because there was a lot of pressure coming from, you know, those sorts of things on Twitter, not to fall into, I guess, those more hedonistic initiatives.
Yeah. So, and those are rooted in, I think, two things. Firstly, this lack of wellbeing literacy, but also this desire to. So we've got, I think it was 2019. Ofsted added a line into how to be an outstanding outstanding management and leadership, and it was something like. Show evidence that staff are continually supported in their well-being. It was phrased something like that's not exact. And when that's added into a document like Ofsted, into the bit that says outstanding, it immediately gets translated. The mechanisms in the brains of the people who are running the schools are, I now need to show I am doing this. So when Ofsted come round, they can see, like you say, Elaine, the bag of goodies. Look at this. You can see I'm supporting wellbeing. I gave everyone a paracetamol. They can see on the timetable every Tuesday morning we do yoga. I'm supporting wellbeing. And it immediately becomes performative. It's almost like it cannot do anything else. And because whilst Ofsted won, and I don't deny they want great well-being for all the teachers, the mechanism of adding it as a policy, or adding it as a line of something you're going to measure and tick and watch for, and means that that school leaders are obliged to give them something to look at. They're obliged to offer something up, and in that space, with the well-being illiteracy and this policy Ofsted demand, it becomes performative. It's almost as if there's no alternative. Head teachers are doing their best. I've never met a head teacher. It's probably never, it's probably stretching it, but I've never met a head teacher who wasn't working really, really hard, really, really valued their staff, really, really wanted the best for their children. And without their own education, they will fall into the traps of providing well-being in a way that perhaps isn't effective.
So should we do that? Should we speak up for the poor, much maligned during this podcast school leader who's been mistakenly placing tea cakes on our desks and inviting us to yoga classes on Tuesday mornings? That if we assume, as you have just in your last answer, assumed that these school leaders, many of whom do listen to this podcast, are really doing their best. You know, they genuinely want happy, healthy, well-motivated staff.
Yes.
Because they know that will lead to good outcomes for the school generally and for the young people there.
Yes.
What are they? So I think we've explored what they've been doing wrong.
Yes.
And by prettying up things and by resorting to hedonistic forms of well-being, as we've explored. What can they do right, Samantha?
Okay.
What one or two things do you feel that these school leaders could pivot towards, which would actually make a more substantial difference to their well-being?
Okay. It's both a simple and complex answer with anything that's worthwhile. Sure. The teachers that I spoke to, and I spoke to teachers in 3 schools, but it was a repeated pattern very quickly, is they want effective and quick recognition from when they're doing things. They want to be recognised. They mostly want to be recognised publicly, but with a caveat that if you forget something that they've done, and if your recognition tool is your well-being, is your newsletter or something, if you forget someone, that can be challenging, but they want to be recognised. They want appropriate CPD. They want to be trained at the appropriate level for where they are, and they want the next steps. And that is a thing that needs to come from both the school leaders and from mentors and from the individual as well. They want the time to be able to do their work. And this was big. This was really loud for me. The most successful wellbeing initiatives, the ones actually that the schools, the teachers liked the most, was one that was called a planning day, where they were given the full-time staff and pro rata 1 day per half term out of school, where they could plan newsletters, school trips, get deep into their data, all of those things that were going to happen anyway, but usually on a Sunday, they were given a day where they felt respected and trusted as a professional because they knew they had to do this job. Everyone knows it, that were these tasks, and they were given the time for that. The time is what they need. And I use the word time as opposed to management of workload. The people I spoke to weren't, and it's 2 sides of the same coin. No one complained about their workload. They just complained about the time to get it done. And when you say workload, it sounds so pejorative, but time does not. So for me, you've got recognition, CPD, time, autonomy. And this is kind of with CPD a little bit, but they want to have the autonomy to run their classrooms the way they want. That gave them the good feelings. And good relationships. People want good relationships with their colleagues. They want good relationships with the people they report to. And this goes with communication and care and that kind of thing. So this is what the teachers want. That's what they were calling for. And these were things that they were appreciating in terms, and they don't sound like well-being when you say autonomy. That doesn't sound like well-being, but actually it is well-being. It is the thing that feeds into this eudaimonic, well-lived life. I'm given the space to think about how I run my classroom. It speaks to the psychological self-efficacy. It speaks to the strength of your relationship. So when you look back at those well-being definitions I gave in the beginning, these things all speak to those.
And they're all achievable, right? They're all, everything achievable. You said is going on in every school.
Yes.
Right. So every school has ways of, newsletters or, recognizing extra effort that's gone in or whatever it might be. Every school has a CPD plan.
Yes.
Every school knows, has a work schedule and can create spaces and times when teachers can work together or work offsite if they need to. Every school has the opportunity to build those good social relationships. And, that's why we call this podcast the Staffroom, Samantha, because we think that's a really important part of a teacher's well-being. And so it's all achievable, but perhaps maybe it would help for school leaders to realize that those are the ingredients to well-being.
I'll stop you there, Mark. It's not just them. If you've got Ofsted saying we want to tacitly saying we wanted to see well-being, if Ofsted don't understand that that's well-being, they're going to be doing other things as well. Because if I've got the inspector in and they said, well, show me examples of well-being, and I say, oh, well, it's a recognition, CPD, I'm giving them time. Well, that's not that's just our work. And you say, yes, that is just our work. And I think we overcomplicate it by saying, I want examples. I want you to evidence, or I want you to show how you are supporting. Well, good leadership is what's supporting well-being. And the idea of the paracetamols and the chocolates and the that's not that you might want to do all of that. Yeah. But the core, the center of it is this culture of good, strong leadership, which is, I genuinely think for the most part is there. There's bits around the edges, and if the school leaders had the wellbeing literacy to be able to turn to someone and say, this is what wellbeing is. I know that. This is what it looks like in my school, in my context, and I know that. I trust myself. And I think perhaps there's some lack of trust in what they're doing. They don't, from kind of this idea of wellbeing literacy or illiteracy, and that creating these performative things that people are upsetting, to look at.
Yeah, I mean, what I hear is it's almost like wellbeing is the outcome of all your school policies. It's not a policy in its own right. It's the outcome of effective leadership. And I feel the same when we're planning leadership development programs, and people say, well, where's your section on wellbeing? And I'm like, well, it's in the bit where we talk about relational trust. It's in the bit where we talk to leaders about how they create a culture of autonomy. It's in the bit where we talk to leaders about how they lead professional learning and how autonomy is so integral to that. So, I think it's a really powerful message. Sadly, we are running out of time. But we always end our podcast with a Post-it note. Okay. So I'm going to pass you a Post-it note, and you can write anything you like on the Post-it note, and you can stick the Post-it note anywhere you like. So you could stick it on Doris's desk, or you could stick it on a wall at the DFE, or you could stick it in every leader's planner. The choice is yours. But what would you like to write on your Post-it note, and where would you like to stick it?
I think, oh dear. Okay, please, may I have 2 Post-it notes? I would like to write on one that good well-being comes from firstly evaluating what's going on in your schools right now, but trusting in your good leadership of the schools. And I would like to send that to the DFE. That's like one for them. And then I would like a second one, and this one I'm going to have on my desk for me, and I'm going to continue banging the drum for this and spreading this knowledge. I really want the idea of wellbeing literacy to be something that we all know about in the same way we have, numeracy and literacy. I want everyone to know about this. This is important.
I think you can hear the bell. I can hear the bell. The bell is telling us that the time that we talked about as being an element of good well-being is up for us. We need to clear out of the staff room. I need to take that coffee mug out of your hand, Samantha, and clear up the biscuit crumbs from Miranda Lane, and call an end to this episode for one more time. Thank you so much, Samantha, for being with us. And
it's a pleasure.
I recommend anybody read your doctoral work, because it's a good place to start if you want to improve your well-being literacy.
Okay, thank you very much,
Samantha.
Thank you, Elaine. Thank you, Mark.
Our thanks go to Samantha O'Sullivan for sharing a coffee but no tea cake with us this week in the staff room.
Please do get in touch if you would like to be part of the conversation. Click on the link at the bottom of the UCL Staff Room webpage.
And if you've enjoyed this episode, there's more where that came from. Search IOE Podcast from wherever you get your podcasts to find episodes of the Staffroom, as well as more podcasts from the IOE.
And a quick favour before you go. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, we'd really appreciate it if you could give the IOE podcast a rating. 5 stars would be nice if you're enjoying the show. And that will help us to reach more people who are interested in hearing what the Staffroom is all about.
Thanks so much for downloading and listening to this IOE podcast.